You notice that you have excessive vibration coming through the steering wheel, or even felt kind of in the seat as you accelerate, then you may have a bad engine mount. Every car has engine mounts. These are a metal arm, if you will, that has a rubber bushing that reduces the vibration felt from the engine being transmitted to the chassis of the car. These rubber bushings over time will crack and then eventually tear, and you'll feel a lot of extra vibration when this happens because the engine itself, the tabs that are going through these mounts, in this case this one is right here under the airbox, these tabs are then resting directly on the chassis of the car. So every time you give it some significant throttle, the engine itself will shift just a little bit, and that shifting, either twisting typically, left or right, forward or backward, will then put pressure directly on the chassis, and you're going to feel all that normal vibration. You may think it is a bad coil pack, which that's what these are. You may think it's a bad drive shaft, and it could be all of those things. So the first thing I would check is your drive shafts. Make sure that the boots on those drive shafts are closed. If they're torn open, it's very often a result of just age and wear. And then if those drive shaft boots tear open, then you're going to have dust and debris getting in there into that U-joint, and then that will corrode it more quickly, or it'll break down more quickly, and then you'll have vibration as there's play in those tripod bearings. The other thing you can do is, again, check for broken or cracked engine mounts. Most cars will have one towards the front of the motor, one to either the left or right, or both, and then they'll typically have one or two more way down here under the car. So make sure you visually inspect engine mounts to make sure that they are not bad. I'm going to replace the passenger side engine mount with this new one right here. The passenger side engine mount is, of course, on this side of the car. It's underneath the airbox. So let's go ahead and remove the airbox. Next thing we want to do is unplug the mass airflow sensor, which is right here. Pull the tab. The plug will slide downward as you pull on this tab right here. Move that to the side. And now there are these hold downs for the airbox here and here, and there's one right here as well. So we need to kind of pull up from here, pull up, straight up, and then kind of rock it out to the side here. I'm going to pull in this direction. And then we're going to kind of pull upwards. Need to get it out of this one right here. So it kind of comes out in a twisting motion like that. And there's our engine mount. Here's the new one. So I have a video about this, but you sometimes can repair a cracked or split or broken engine mount with polyurethane. And I actually used polyurethane sealant, and it worked for about 3 weeks. So it can buy you some time, and it may also be permanent, but in this case it's still split after a while. before removing any engine mount, you need to support the engine in some other way. The best way to do this, of course, is from underneath. You need to find a suitable point, preferably not on the oil pan like I have it, but you need to find a place on the bottom of the engine. Depending on the side that you're working on, the oil pan is about the closest I can get to where I need to support it. And I have a piece of rubber between the oil pan and the jack. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack up the engine until I can see that there's some pressure being relieved on this engine mount right here. So I'm not seeing a lot of movement. That's probably because I put that polyurethane sealant in it, so it's keeping it from moving it too much. But as long as there is some support underneath the engine, that's the most important thing. That way, when you need to put the new one back in, the alignment of the bolts is about where you need it to be. So you still may need to jack up the engine a little bit more or drop it a little bit more to make sure that these holes align properly and that you can install the new mount. So these two bolts right here are 18mm. This is a 5/8, or I believe a 16mm, but a 5/8 fits perfectly, so you can use that as well. You're going to need a 1/2-inch breaker bar with an extension like this, because these are going to be pretty tight. Standard ratchet is not going to have enough power, not enough torque. So once you've broken these nuts loose, you can switch over to a standard ratchet. Notice they have some Loctite on them, so when we replace these, we're going to go ahead and put some new Loctite or thread locker back on here. And these. So I'm seeing the engine drop down, which means we're going to have to lift it a bit when we want to replace the engine mount here, so be aware of that. So I haven't broken this one loose. I'm going to use my breaker bar. And now I can just remove that. Also has Loctite on it that you can see right there. Set that to the side so I know where it goes. I'm going to show you this. There's one right here, one right here. These are 5/8 or 16 millimeter, I believe, and one right here. But notice they are different lengths, so don't mix those up. The shorter one goes right here on the outside. Alright, the engine mount is free. Should be able to rock it up and out of here. There's the old engine mount. This is a hydraulic type engine mount, so this is not going to be that cheap. This has a this is fluid filled, so surprisingly light though. Cast aluminum construction. And here's the new one. So you just drop it back into place. Now this is one of the easier engine mounts. Engine mounts can sometimes be in very difficult locations to get to, so you may not want to attempt this yourself. This one just happens to be in an easier location, so I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So we need our thread locker. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. You want to put thread locker back on parts that are going to be getting a lot of vibration. Of course, these will. Now, I'm not going to tighten this nut all the way down because I may need to shift this around a little bit just to make sure I can align all the bolts correctly back in the holes. So, put it back on here. So what I'm seeing right now is I just can't quite reach those threads, so I'm going to have to lift the engine up a little bit. All you need to do is get the thread started. You don't want to jack the engine all the way up so it's necessarily flush. Just get it high enough so you can start those threads without stripping them. Now an engine mount should have torque specs online. I don't know what those torque specs are for this particular car. This is a Saab 9.3, but it should be in the range of 100 to 150 foot-pounds for these bolts. These take a lot of vibration constantly. This is an engine mount after all. That's what it does, is it quells vibration. So I'm going to make sure this is well over 100 foot-pounds. You can do that with a torque wrench, of course, or kind of put a good amount of weight on it. Should I get these? You don't want to see any space between this, the actual engine right here, this bracket, and the engine mount. So just tighten it down until it stops, and then we'll torque it from there. One thing I should add is a bad engine mount that's really bad, you'll feel vibration at lower RPMs especially, even at idle. When the car is just sitting there, stopped at a light especially, you're in drive, you'll feel plenty of vibration. Your steering wheel may even shake a little bit. So an engine mount that's about to go bad may not be as noticeable except for under throttle. But an engine mount that is completely bad will transmit vibration at all times through the chassis of the car, so you will definitely feel it. Always wear gloves, by the way. It'll save you a lot of busted knuckles. So I'm going to set my torque wrench to 130 foot-pounds and tighten these back down. Let's get this to refocus. Focus. That is not 130. That is not how tight it felt. So I'm going to drop it back to 100. Learning here. Let's say 110. Let's see how that does. Learning here with you. Let's go to 110. Okay, let's go to 110. 130 felt too tight. Tighter than it felt to break it loose with a breaker bar. Now we just put the airbox back in. Plug back our mass airflow sensor. Then we'll need to tighten down this collar right here. And that is how you change an engine mount. Thanks for watching.